Hi everyone, my name is Catherine. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with my summer reading wrap up. I'm so excited. I've never done a wrap up before, so I'm excited to see if I race through it or if I'm a little bit rambly. It's been a little while since I've filmed a video. I was away on a really awesome camping trip around Lake Superior. So if you've never been, it's in the northern part of Ontario, Wisconsin, and also Minnesota. And it's just such a beautiful part of both countries. And it was a really great trip. So I've been enjoying watching everyone's videos, but I haven't sat down to film a video in quite a while. So I'm gonna include hopefully I'm looking over at my big stack of books that I have next to me. I'm gonna include some footage, hopefully at the end of this video, just from some b-roll from my trip. I was hoping to film a reading vlog, but that just did not happen. So I hope you enjoy the beautiful footage that I include anyway. I'm really gonna try to knock this video out in one take. It normally takes me quite a few to get myself going, but I just got home from the work and the light is setting. So I'm gonna have a bit of a rambly one take summer reading wrap up for you. So I'm just gonna get into it with the books that I read in July. So the first book that I started in June and finished in July is Mrs. Dalloway. I'll put a photo of the cover here because I already gave my copy away to a friend. I loved Mrs. Dalloway. I gave it 4 stars. Everyone says that it's a bizarre read and you've never read anything like it. And it was still even more bizarre than I thought it was. Nothing can really prepare you for reading Mrs. Dalloway. It's such a unique book, but I loved reading it so much. I thought it was unique. I thought it was bizarre. I was really intrigued by the story the whole time that I was reading it. And I think that I am hopefully really excited to read some more of Virginia Woolf's work. Some of her other books and also some biographies of her life I think would be really interesting. I wrote down a quote, one of my favorite quotes from Mrs. Dalloway, and it is, "What is this terror? What is this ecstasy? What is it that fills me with extraordinary excitement? It was Clarissa," he said, "for there she was," which is about Clarissa Dalloway, who is Mrs. Dalloway in the story. So anyway, I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read in July was God Killer by Hannah Kanner. This is a library copy that is overdue. I have to bring it back to the library. This was my first buddy read. I read this with Curious Cat. I'll link her channel in the description down below. I had so much fun reading this book. I gave it a 3 stars because I had a lot of criticisms of it. And I think I had a lot of criticisms because I was reading it for a buddy read. I was reading it a little bit more critically than I probably would have if I was just reading it myself for pure enjoyment. So I did have a lot of criticisms, but I really enjoyed myself. I had so much fun reading it with Kat, and I read the second book, and the third book I think is going to be on my September TBR, so I can fill out the trilogy. God Killer is so hard to explain. Basically, gods are forbidden in this world of Midrin, and Kissin, who is her main character, is a god killer. And then she gets there's this found family aspect. She gets caught up with this young girl named Inara, and she is attached to a god, and Kissin needs to figure out how to separate them. I'm almost having a hard time summarizing the first book because so much happens in these books and in the subsequent books, but it is such a fun series. It kind of gives the Witcher fantasy vibes, if that's something you might be interested in. Very big found family vibes in this book as well, and I just really enjoyed it. The next book that I read is Happy Hour by Marlo Granados. This is a no plot, just vibes book. It takes place in New York, and it just follows our main character and her best friend as they just live out a summer in New York. And it kind of just follows them on the day-to-day, what they're doing for work, the parties that they're going to, they're going out dancing, what they're eating. And it just it encapsulates the vibe of female joy in one summer in New York. I thought this was a little bit too no plot for me. There were some really beautiful sections. There was a lot of wonderful prose. I think it encapsulated the female experience being a young 20-something woman really, really well. But I did find myself getting kind of bored and skipping through sections. So I give this one 4 stars because it was so beautifully written. But now that I'm looking back on it, I think I might change that to a 3.5 or 3.75 because I just don't find it that memorable overall. And I also had really, really high hopes for this book because one of my favorite YouTubers, Carly, this is one of her favorite books of all time. And I just didn't like it as much. The last book that I read in July was Emma by Jane Austen. This was a 5.5 star read for me. This is my favorite Austen that I've read so far, 100%. I thought it was light. I thought it was fun. I thought it was gossipy. I think it has a very different energy to a lot of Austen's other more popular works like Pride and Prejudice. And I just had so much fun with this. I read this for Jane Austen July, and I participated in the read-along, so I was reading about 2 chapters a day. This fly is driving me crazy. I was reading about 2 chapters a day, and I would read my allotted 2 chapters and just want to tear through the whole book in 2 days. And there were a couple days that I did read ahead, and then I would kind of stop and pace myself until the group kind of caught back up with where I was. But I've never had that experience with an Austen before, and even normally not with classics. I really enjoy reading them, but I'm not necessarily tearing through them. But this one, I couldn't put it down. Loved it so much. Highly recommend. If you haven't read Emma, it really is it's a romp. It's really fun. So those are all the books that I read in July. I had a little bit of a slower reading month, but I kind of brought it back around in August. So the first book that I read in August was Sunbringer, which is the sequel to Godkiller. I read this. It was another buddy read with Kat from Curious Cat and Rochelle at Good Morning Dreamer. And this one is a kind of popular opinion online is that this one is not as strong as the first book, which is funny because I thought this one was way stronger than the first book. I found that the plot moved really quickly. The characters developed really well. I was really invested in everyone's story. I just loved it. I thought the world building was wonderful, and I had such a fun time, and it made me really invested for the 3rd and final book in the series, Faithbreaker. So again, I had such a fun time buddy reading this book, and so I'll always look back on it fondly because of that. The next book I read in August is Sex Cult Nun. This is by Faith Jones, and she was born and raised in the Children of God cult, and this was such a great book. I try not to, or in recent years, I've kind of moved away from star rating memoirs, especially memoirs that have to do with traumatic pasts. I think it's just kind of odd to put a star rating on someone's life story. It's just not shaming anyone that does, but it's just kind of weird to me. So I've stepped away from doing that, but I did love this book. And I was getting a little nervous because I read a lot of bad reviews of this one online, and I decided to just pick it up anyway, and I thought it was amazing. So moving. Just, it was incredibly well written. And I think the thing that struck me the most is Faith Jones's love and passion for reading. And there's these chapters where she discovers novels for the first time, and she is sneaking away and hiding away to get in a chapter a day. And her love and passion for reading and for education was so inspiring to me. And it also just kind of reminded me of why I read. And I think on BookTube specifically, and especially on Book Talk, but on BookTube, it can be very, not a competitive space, but it can be, right? Like, you're trying to read, a lot of books a month, and you're trying to meet all of these challenges and keep up with these goals, and it turns more into a project than something that you do just purely out of love and fulfillment and enjoyment. And I see people set these crazy high reading goals for themselves and get disappointed when you don't reach them. And I think it takes away from the fact that we should just be grateful to be able to read, and to read even one book a month. You're reading so much more than such a huge chunk of the world's population. And I think this book just really kind of put that back into perspective for me, which I really enjoyed. The next book I read for YA August, and that is A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lin. I had a blast with this while I was reading it. I gave it a 3.75 stars. I think Judy did an incredible job of building a world. The atmosphere was amazing. The descriptions of food made my mouth actually water. They were so incredible. And the story moved at a breakneck pace. It moved so quickly, which was really amazing while I was reading it, and I loved it. But I think in reflection, after finishing the book, there was so little character development because the plot was moving so fast that I almost don't even really care to read the sequel, because it felt so wrapped up and so well done that I feel ready to move on. I feel no desire to pick up the sequel, which I think probably is not a good thing. It did definitely lack a lot of character development, but I just had so much fun reading it. And I would say if you're in a reading slump, this would be a really great, fun fantasy book to pick up and just get you out of that slump, because they just dive right into the plot, which is amazing. Yeah, so I highly recommend. I keep forgetting to like explain what the books are about while I'm reviewing them, but this is about a young girl who is competing in a tea steeping competition, a magical tea steeping competition to hopefully save her sister's life. And the competition becomes more political and dangerous than she was expecting. So yeah, I gave this a 3.75 stars. I recommend it as a slump breaker for sure. So moving on to my last two books that I read in August. This is The Boys in the Boat. I gave this a 4.75 stars. This was amazing. This is the nonfiction story about the 1936 American rowing team that competed in the 1936 Olympics, which happened in Berlin. So I thought this book did an incredible job at getting you to care about rowing, about talking about how interesting rowing is as a sport. It weaved in what life was like in 1930s Washington. It talked about the difference in the competition between the schools, and then it also paralleled with this amazing story of, it's just so well written, and it weaves all of these pieces together. And the part that I thought was most interesting was talking about the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And of course, this is right before World War II, and it was just this huge propaganda machine, and how that was so successful and so well done. And people walked away from the 1936 Berlin Olympics thinking, wow, Germans are so accepting and so kind and so, powerful, and wow, Hitler's this great guy. And how they had this amazing, it was just this huge propaganda machine. And I think that piece was so interesting and so well woven into the rest of the story. I couldn't put this down. This was the book I read while I was on my trip, and I was picking it up every second that I could. I gave it a 4.5 instead of a 5 because there were some chapters I found, especially at the parts between their big regattas. So you train all year, and you race 2 regattas. Basically, these boys would train all year, every single day, and they would race 2 races in the entire year. And so there was a lot of training sections, and there were some chapters that I found could have been a little more brief. But overall, I found this was so compelling, so interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading more from Daniel James Brown. And then the last book that I read in August was This Summer Will Be Different by Carley Fortune. This is a romance novel. I love reading Carley Fortune's books. All of her novels are set in Canada, and the first 2 novels are set in Northern Ontario, which is close to my heart, so I loved them. This one is set in PEI, and it is my least favorite book by Carley Fortune. I ended up giving this one a 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I think this book made me realize I don't love dual timelines in romance books. I just think it makes it really hard to connect with and get to know the characters, and I just don't like it. I also didn't love the main character, and I hated her best friend. I found her so annoying. I don't know why Carley Fortune wrote her the way that she did, because she was literally insufferable the whole book. I don't know if that's just me, but every time that she would be in a chapter, I was like, oh my God. Oh, she was just driving me crazy. And it's the sister of the main protagonist's boyfriend. Anyway, I just didn't end up liking this one. And I love a good romance novel, especially in the summer, like a beachy romance. I love Yearning. I love little, I don't know, I love it. And this one just did not do it for me, which is really unfortunate because I don't read a ton of romance. Like usually I read like maybe one a season, and I don't normally pick up bad ones. I find I have a pretty good nose for good romance. So this one was definitely a disappointment, but I do recommend that you check out Carly Fortune's other books because the rest of them have been amazing so far. All right, those are all of my summer books. Thank you for watching my rambly video. I'm a little nervous about this one. This is the only time I've ever sat down and filmed a video in one straight go, and I think a big reading wrap up was a little ambitious, but thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments what you read in your summer TBR, if you've ever read any of these books. What did you think of them? And thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great day.